As quilters, we love fabric. The more, the better. And I love putting as many different fabrics in my quilts as possible. You remember the one up here that I just made? It's right here behind me a couple weeks ago. It was all made out of charm squares and strips, leftover fabrics. Perfect. I don't want to waste fabric. I want to be able to use it. But even after this quilt, I had charm squares left over. What am I going to do with them? Well, I found a solution and I can't wait to show you. I'm Lea Louise from Inspired Quilting by Lea Louise, and I am not going to let my fabric pile up. I have a great idea for charm squares. Actually, you can use any size square, but you will love this. You're actually familiar with it, but we're going to mix it up. It's a new look. And I think you're going to love this. So come on, let's go ahead and get started. Grab your fabrics, get your charm squares. We have some quilts to make. As quilters, we find when we quilt a lot, we get a lot of leftovers. And sometimes they'll just sit in a bin or in a bag or wherever on a shelf and don't get used. Well, I make good use of my scraps, my pieces, my leftovers. And I want to show you some of the ways I do that. This particularly is about using charm squares and some really creative disappearing 9-patch blocks as well. But I just wanted to show you real quick how I stage and put up my fabric pieces that are left over. Now these are charm squares, and there's a lot here, but I use a lot of charm squares. And I'll come and I'll, grab like a handful of this, and this is, a nice lap size quilt. So having these allows me to quilt fast, and I have a nice variety of colors. Now, if you haven't seen how I cut my fat quarters, you might want to check this video up above because that shows you how I break it down. So I cut the 5-inch squares. Sometimes I'll even cut 10-inch squares and put those aside. If I'm particularly in a rush, I'll cut one row of 5-inch squares and then a 5-inch strip. So I have a strip, the full length, in this case of fabric versus just a fat quarter, but it gives me a kind of a step to where to store this, and I can use it later, but I can also cut this into 2.5-inch strips, and that's really good. So there are a lot of options. Now, when you cut charm squares out of a fat quarter, remember it's 18 inches by 20. I cut it by the 20, so I get my 4 charms. And then after I cut my 15, I have a good 3 or 4 inches left over because some fabric companies now are cutting their fat quarters at 19 inches instead of 18. I so appreciate that. I know the fat quarter shop does, and I like that because if the previous cut wasn't exactly square or it's crooked, then you may come up short. So having that extra bit really helps. And that's what these are. These are the strips left over when I cut my fat quarters. Now, you've seen that I do a lot of strips. I do a lot of charm squares. I do a lot of scrappy pieces in general. And I love lots of colors, lots of fabric, lots of contrast in all my quilts. So I wanted just to show you this to give you an idea of how I draw my fabric. So I pile them up in here. I may be going through a month or so of some specific quilts and have lots of leftovers, put them in, then come back and say, okay, what am I doing next? Now, here's some leftovers from a recent quilt. You may remember the pink and green charm square. Actually, it's hanging Actually, it's hanging behind me in the intro video. And it's a super simple pattern. It's about using charm squares and strips all in the same quilt. It is such a wonderful way to use up all your extra pieces. Well, these are the pieces that are left over from that quilt. Plus, I added some extra. It was mostly a pink quilt, pink and green. So I wanted to add some blue. I have some purple, some turquoise, just to kind of round out all the colors. And I don't have a lot of yellow or gold. I put a few pieces in there and overall, and some low volume. When I do a scrappy quilt, it's always a great idea not to just have the dark colors, but make sure you have some with light backgrounds. That's going to create contrast throughout your quilt. It's going to be more appealing, and it gives your eyes a place to rest, because if it's just all color, full of color and you don't really see anything in particular, you don't see the fabric. You just see this, quilt filled with whatever it may be. I like to use contrast and accent pieces, and I will show you in this particular quilt how I'm going to do that. So let me go ahead and get started. I'm going to show you first what the beginning step is. Most of you all probably know, so I won't take a lot of time with it. But for you new quilters, this is an easy way to make a beautiful, intricately looking quilt. Let's talk a quick minute about putting your blocks together. You can go completely scrappy and just pull one right after the other, sew them, and create your 9 patch and move from there. I like a little bit more contrast and what I like to call randomly organized. So I'll use a bit of everything, but there's a specific way I want to lay it out so that I get a good balance throughout my quilt, a balance of color as well as a balance of prints. Now, the very first thing I do is I start with a common color. Now, in this case, I'm using all the same print because I had quite a bit of it. But you could even go with a color like this. Anything that carries that general color. This is another one that you could use in the center. So it kind of carries that color scheme throughout the quilt, and it allows some continuity through all the blocks and brings some of these other colors into the picture so that they look like they fit. And I just think that's a great way to have a finished quilt look as though there was a plan, even though it's totally scrappy. That's just my take on it, and I wanted to share that with you. So here's the 9 patch I was working on. Then I decided I want to show you how I choose my colors. So I'm going to start with my center right here. And I generally put my darkest blocks to the corner. And I do that because a lot of times when you're doing a 9 patch, it's these center pieces that get crossed in the disappearing 9 patch. They get cut crossways. So I like to put colors through the center that will sort of bring things together. Now, here's a pretty one that I really like. And I think we'll kind of go with green because we've got a nice green and white over here. So these 4 I try to keep on a little bit of the lighter side. And I have a blue one here. And when I say light, that means sort of it either has a light contrast. In this case, it's the background. In this case, it's the design, as is this. It's white and a really pale pink. But you see how next to each other, all of these contrast together. And by doing that, we get some really good looking blocks. All right, so we'll get a dark blue in here. And let me find something else. Let's see. I was looking for something pink. I think this will work right there. So there we go. So see how these 4 are lighter and these 4 are darker. This is my constant. It can be anything you want. White, black, anything in between. Now, I got this far on this particular block, and do you notice how I have these? It's almost like it's in reverse. I have the darks in the center, and I have the lights on the outer corners. It works the same way. It actually is going to help disperse the colors a bit more dramatically. So not all the big pieces will be dark and not all the smaller pieces will be light or vice versa. This way we get a good mix of the colors in the different size that they fall. But look at this. There's really no contrast there. It's pretty and it looks fine. So I pulled these 2 out because I really liked going with the purple. And this would work, absolutely, but you see, that's the same print. Do you see those? Those 2 are the same sort of a starburst. So I'm going to use this floral. The floral works well here too because we have a geometric, a graphic, and then even though this is a floral, it's a fern leaf, it's much larger. So I look at balance in the pattern size as well. What are the patterns of the prints? Like we have a really big one here and a small one there. Works great. This, again, big and small, This is just sort of random, and because it's monochromatic, you don't really see a lot of that pattern. So these are just things to think about while you're putting your blocks together. Now, I want to show you how to make your 9-patch blocks. Here's another important point about scrappy pieces of fabric, scrappy leftovers, scrappy orphan blocks. You have sewn these with fabrics from a multitude of different sources, whether they came in a collection, they were fat quarters, they're charms, they were yardage, whatever. They've all probably been cut at different times, which means they're not going to be exactly 5 inches, but that's okay. We can work around it. What I do is when I put my 2 blocks together, I will put one on top of the other like this. And I want to be able to see both fabrics at the same time. So I can see a little bit all the way around, and I can see a little here. So I know they're pretty much the same size. Well, I was doing that with this one. And I noticed I'm not seeing anything around. So when I looked at this, I could see that this was off quite a bit. Now, there's 2 things to look at. Either this is small or this is big. I want to follow the 5-inch square. If I measure this, my yellow block underneath is just the smidgenest bit over 5. But this purple one is under. Not quite 1/8 of an inch, but enough that it could make a difference in the seam allowance. So what I do here is I split the difference. I let the yellow show through evenly on both sides. Do you see that? And then that way, as I'm sewing, I'm going to make that up as I sew these together. It's not enough of a difference that I'm going to recut a square because this will work, but this helps to balance the block sizes. So as I'm sewing them together into the patch, everything is going to nest. So this is something that you want to keep an eye on if you do a lot of your own block cutting, or as in Scrappy Quilts, you're mixing everything together. You never know what you're going to get. So let me go ahead and finish sewing these together, and I'll show you how that looks. I think these disappearing 9-patch blocks I'm going to show you might be a little bit surprising. We know there's lots of different layouts, and we know there's a lot of ways we can put it together, but specifically we are going to make a scrappy 9-patch, which means we're going to use all of our fabrics. But then we're going to change the layouts, and it's about color placement. Color makes such a difference, particularly in a block like this. I want to show you how I make my 9-patch blocks, and then I'm going to show you how we put this all together. Let's talk about the best ways to assemble your 9-patch. For me, I chain piece everything. I will start with my first row, and I will put these 2 together. And I'll sew them all the way through, press it, open it, and then add the 3rd block. My goodness, they're all curling up. So it's a very simple process, but what's really important is you want your seams to match up. You want them to nest. So when I'm finished, I will press the seams on the outer 2 sides in one direction and the center seam in the opposite. That way, when I go to nest these together, then I can line them up. This chain stitching holds everything together. So even if I have to set aside, let's say I'm making a number of these blocks and I don't have time to finish them, but I could get a lot of sewing done. Go through and get them to this point, get them pressed, fold them up, and then just stack them like this. And then when you're ready to go, you are good. You've got a pile of sewing that's all set to finish. Now, once you get to this point, the next step is to sew them together. Now, this is where we're nesting our seams. And we want these corners to line up pretty good because these are what we're going to see in the quilt. So we have our seams pressed in opposite directions. You can see how they nest up right here. And again, we're going to put these together and they're going to line up right on the seam. And if it's easier for you to pin this, absolutely. Otherwise, because we're just going for 5 inches, once you sew to here, then set this one. And if you've paid attention to your seam allowance, keeping it consistent, and your 5-inch block size, you shouldn't have any trouble. Now, what I try to do, which I did on this side, is my favorite direction is sewing when this seam is facing my feed dog. So as I'm coming down, I'm coming towards this piece. Two reasons. Number one, the back side is facing down. I don't have to worry about it flipping over. And secondly is the feed dogs nudge this into that seam just the littlest bit closer. So I find that to be the easiest and probably the corners with the best results because they fit so nice together. Now, I really like how these colors work in this particular block, and see how they sort of carry out throughout the quilt block. I'm loving it. But let me show you this one. This one's completely finished. All the seams are pressed. Oh, I've got a little fold over. I'm not going to worry about that. That's not going to make a big difference. It presses nice and flat. I'm good with that. I do press as I go. When I do this part first, where all three of them are individual, you see, I have to find the opening here, how I pressed each of them in the proper direction that I'm going to be using for when I sew. That way, I don't have to worry about when I get ready to start that I have to press everything first. I sew them and then I press them. And the same with this. Once this is done, I do this pressing. So these go this way, this goes that way, and these seams nest. It just makes it a whole lot cleaner putting your quilt together this way. Now, there's a couple things I really like about the way this turned out that I want to show you. We've got good points. That's always great. I like I said, this one we have the lighter colors out in the corner. I like when these colors sort of blend into each other. There's a lot of green and yellow in here along with the blue and purple. And of course, we've got green and yellow here. We have green and yellow, so that sort of melds. You see this block had different colors on each side. I made sure the pink one matched up with this. This may be a lot more than you want to worry about, but I do because I think it helps that line, the seam line, blend. Like, see these purple ones, it just sort of leads here, and turquoise, and I always put a yellow next to purple and navy blue. It just, especially this chartreusey kind of lemon lime, I'm not sure what it is. I guess it's a key lime, right? And that works out really well. So if you pay attention to your colors a little bit, and your eyes know, when you look, you can go, ooh, I don't like that at all. Or you put something in that works really well, and you know that's a great fit. The colors look awesome. You love it. Then go with it, because that's going to be a perfect fit. Did you get some ideas about making your 9 patch? I really like that common color in the center, and you're going to see why that's important as we work through these different methods. But I also want you to understand about how important it is to get the right sizes for your blocks. And like I said, sometimes you just have to work through it because they may not always be the exact same, but that's okay. Don't let it stop you. But work with color and work with patterns and different prints that you have, and find a way to make it all work with your light and your dark. And it's beautiful. You're going to love it. And now that you have these beautiful, gorgeous 9 patches, we're going to cut them up and make something else. So let's take a look and see what happens next. All right, we have lots of 9 patches ready to go, and we're going to learn multiple ways to make a disappearing 9 patch block. This one is straightforward. This is what everybody is pretty much used to. We have our 9 patches. It should measure 14 inches square. Now, when I cut mine, you can put it on the mat, but I just like my double ruler. So I put 2 1/4 here, and I put 2 1/4 here. I know I'm nice and straight, and go. All right, then I'm going to do the same in the other direction, preferably without moving my fabric, but that does sometimes happen. Okay, so again, I'm at 2 1/4 here and 2 1/4 here. Bringing my second ruler, and I'm just a bit shy, so I'm going to move this over, and then this way I'm cutting it evenly. So my seam allowance may have been off there, or the way I pressed it, or something was cut small. Whatever the case may be, again, split the difference. It's very minute and it's not going to matter much in the scheme of what we're doing. Scrappy quilts, lots of fabric, lots of fun. We love it. So what I've done here is I've cut it in 4, and here's your traditional disappearing 9 patch. You take opposing corners and you flip them, and you get this nice pattern. And see, just it changes it up. It looks beautiful. It's fun to play with. But here's my first hack, if you want to call it that. Don't stop here. When you're doing this, you have so many other options as well. You can, now for one thing, I want these not to all be in the same place. So I would bring this one down here and this one up there. Now, automatically, that looks great. I think that looks better. But I don't want to necessarily have these colors together. So maybe what I'm going to do is put one over here, and then that would put this one over this way. Now, by doing this, we're creating a totally different look. And again, this is where that common square comes in. No matter how you lay this out, that is going to create color throughout the entire quilt that's going to balance it in an even repeating pattern. I mean, it looks like that's the way it's supposed to go. So if you do all your blocks the same way, then you're going to have that repeat, and it's going to look awesome throughout. Now, let's see. There are a couple other ways to do this. We can turn it that way, and we can put this one here and this one here. And, you know, that's fun because you're playing with this vertical. You're going to have this vertical throughout the quilt. And you can also do it so that they meet. Let's see, I don't want those to be in the same place. And they can meet. Whoops, got to change my colors around. Okay, so here's the situation, and this is exactly what I'm going to show you next. Sometimes when you're working within only one block, you can't move things around as much because you get too much repetition in color. So let me show you how we solve that one. Even with a scrappy quilt, we can sometimes come up with too many blocks of the same print, and we're trying to figure out how to put them together but not be side by side. So we're going to look at another option. We're going to take some multiple 9 patches that we have cut, and we're going to combine them by mixing them up between the blocks. Oh my goodness, you're gonna love this. Number 2, here we go, watch and see. So the first thing you do, my hack number 1, mix it up around, see how you can change it. But even better is incorporate more blocks. So let's say you're going to have a multiple number of blocks to make a quilt or a cushion, pillow, lap quilt, whatever it may be. You're going to use more than one block. Well, mix them up. So right here, I have 4 individual 9 patches that I have cut into quarters. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of each of these and place them together in a pile. And I'm just going to kind of spread them around a little bit. There we go. So there, now we have 2. Now I'm going to go for a third one in each pile. And by doing this, I am going to have different fabrics throughout the entire block. So I can turn these every which way, and that's okay because I'm not going to have anything next to each other because the fabrics aren't the same. So let's go ahead and set these aside for a minute, and let's take these 4. So let's put our block together. Let's say this is a block, and this is the starting point. So the first thing we can do is turn these this way, and then we get a nice looking traditional disappearing 9 patch. And that actually looks pretty. I like it. But the other thing we can do, and I kind of like to start back in the middle so you get an idea what we're doing. Let's turn these and go multiple directions so that not everything is exactly the same. So let's see, we can put this here. I like this. So we can turn it this way. And now when your blocks are going to be stacked together, these pink squares are going to be spread around in a different manner, but yet it's also going to be in a repeating pattern that is going to become visible as the quilt comes together. So let's see, there's one. Let's try another one. So what I'm really wanting to impress here is that you can see these are two of the same blocks. I'm just going to grab another one because I don't want two of the same colors. Is that you want to create a scrappy quilt with lots of scraps. Don't just stay with one block. Mix it up and see what you can come up with. Again, we can turn it the traditional way like this, but here's one that I think would look pretty with this one. You know, this is always a fun way to put blocks together, is you get a 4-patch in the middle with like a lattice border and you have these cornerstones. Oh my gosh, how great would this look with a bunch of these blocks all together? Let's get this one back over here and see what this one would look like with a similar layout. I'm going to put that up here. And this one, and this one. Now see, that makes a great block. And this would go together so simply because the cornerstones are going to keep everything nice and straight and even. So those are going to be some pretty easy seams. All right, so that's some fun there. Now, what else can we do? Let's take these 4 and make a big blocks at a starting point. Kind of want to mix these up a little bit. There we go. Okay, I don't want those two in the same block, so I'm going to take this one out. There we go. And so again here, we go to the traditional method like this, or we can do this one, which is common. You just have a row that goes through, and it's kind of fun because you get this vertical strip between your rows of fabrics, and it really looks kind of neat. Now, I made a mistake and I put 2 low volumes or 2 really light blocks side by side as opposed to doing my alternating. I probably just wasn't paying attention, just sewing along. But that's okay. It's going to be surrounded by other blocks and it's not going to be a problem. So don't sweat those details. It really is not critical. A single block in one place in a large quilt is not going to be noticeable. Let's see. Then we can do, let me think about this one. With our blocks this way, we're going to have another, like a lattice strip or a sashing around these. And that's really cool. Now you can also do it this way, where we bring the 4 together in the middle, and here we are again with our 4-patch and our 4 corners. I keep going back to this. I think I like this. Is my favorite for your basic traditional, what do I want to say, disappearing 9-patch. So let's try one more. All right, I had a bunch of these. So I had 4, and I cut them all up. I am going to have some repetition here, it looks like. But I cut up 4 so we could have 4 different groups and not have too much repeating. So what I'm going to do, just for the sake of this, I do have some of these fabrics. Let's see, this one. All right. Took me a minute there, but I found one. All right, so what we can do here, again, the traditional, which looks awesome, the stacked linear lines like that, so that would repeat across here, which would look great. And you could also make a lot of these blocks and switch them and turn them 90 degrees. So sometimes it goes this way and sometimes it goes this way, and the blocks sort of offset each other. By doing that, you're also eliminating a lot of extra matching seams, which is always a good thing. And then come back to my standby. You know, I think I really like this. I've seen this done where the 4 pieces are the same color. So if this were my starting point, this were my 9-patch, and these were all the same color, then when you do this, these all become very monochromatic because this would all be the same. And I don't like that nearly as well. Here, I like this better. But play around with it a little bit. This can be a lot of fun. It's a simple way. It's a great beginner's quilt. It's a fantastic way to use scraps, and it's so simple. So remember, number one, play with your layouts. But number two, play with lots of blocks at one time too. Don't just use a single block, cut it and turn it and set it into your pattern. Use multiple blocks together and switch the pieces. Number two is a winner for me so far, and I love this. I really like the way that looks. Are you thinking about some new ways to do your next 9-patch quilt? I sure hope so. But don't decide yet because there's another option I want to show you. This one is really fun, and the reason I like it is because you can really focus on a single color in a scrappy quilt. So the quilt is filled with all kinds of prints and patterns, but by keeping a particular few blocks within a common color family, you are going to create a dynamic design. So wait until you see this one. All right, here we go. Number 3. And here's number 3. This is really a fun way to organize your quilt to meet a particular colorway. Let's say you want to make somebody, in this case, is going to be pink, but a particular color or maybe novelty or a style print. They like geometrics, whatever the case may be. You can make that become a dominant feature in your quilt by putting that block in your diagonal. So in your 9-patch, you want to have that block, whatever it may be, color, print, design, to be diagonally. And then when you cut it, what you do is you bring these two colors into the center. Now, do you see what's happening here? Look at that. See how that runs through? And what's going to happen is as these blocks come together, these pinky colors will all meet. Now, they don't have to be the exact color. They don't have, and they can certainly bring in other colors, but you're going to get this beautiful diagonal. And let's see, we have a couple more here I want to show. So see here, now we have an extension of this one, and it needs to go here. We have an extension here. Well, you can't see that over there, but this is how it works, and I think this would be great fun. This is wonderful, like I said, in a scrappy quilt that has lots of colors, or if you go monochromatic, like let's say you have lots of blues and greens, and you want to bring in a pop of another color. And it could just be a lighter color, it could be turquoise, it could be white, whatever the case may be that you like or that you want to have in your quilt. And this is a beautiful way. And look how easy this is. It's the same pattern, the same layout. We cut it. All we do is add that third, there we go, that third charm throughout your 9-patch, that third row, so they're there diagonally. And what a difference. Look at that. Isn't that pretty? I think this is really a great way to make a quilt. And you know me, I love the contrast. I love those colors that stand out and really bring attention to your quilt. All right, so that's 3. Let's see what the next one's going to bring. Our 4th technique is really going to shake things up. We're going to cut in a completely different manner and turn things around and twist them about, and this is going to be a fantastic layout. It's very different. You may have seen it, but I'm going to show you a different way we can do this. So let's get started. Here's number 4. Block number 4 takes on a totally new look, and that means we're going to cut it differently. Instead of going through the middle, we're going to cut off the outer edges. So the first thing we do is we cut off 2.5 inches from 2 sides. So we have a 2.5-inch strip. This should now measure 2.25. And then we do the same thing, making sure only cut from the middle because we don't want to cut these outer strips. All right, now, do you see where we're going with this? going to come over here and do the same thing. So I cut the 2.5-inch strips. I do need to cut these. And like I said, we've got some thread there. We come in, this should measure 2.25, and I should get my 2.5-inch out here, and I'm just fine. And then I'm just going to turn this around and do the same thing. So put it at 2.25 and make sure, okay, I'm a little shy, so I'm going to bump this in just the littlest bit so I get most of my 2.5. And again, these small fractions in the long scheme of things really don't make a huge difference because the seam allowance will accommodate for a lot of it. Okay, so now this is what I have. And the idea here is to use 2 blocks that have the white backgrounds or the light backgrounds in the center squares. Because then as we switch these around, we are going to get a very different look. So let's see, this will go here, and I'm going to turn this way, and turn this way, and what I may do is just put it on the opposite side. Let's see, wait a minute, I'm getting confused. All right, this goes to this block, so it's going to come over here. All right, there it is. And I don't want this dark green there. Okay, so you play with it a little bit, and you get this wonderful block. What's fun about this is when you put this all together, you are going to have these patchworks alternating with your solid square. And then these blocks are kind of like your background square. I like the look, and the fact that I use different fabrics changes this up so they're not just a solid background. I like more color in there. But what if we take on another look? Now let's go ahead and do it this way. You see, I still have my lights in the centers of each, between the darker colors. They alternate. But notice here I did the reverse. So this section is dark where this is light. Still keep the common square. Now I'm going to take this one for this one, just like this. And I'll take this one and put it, actually I'm going to put that down here. And this down here. So that means this will go up there, and this will go up there, kind of, sort of. And then we're going to move these two. So I'm going to take this one out, and let's see how this all works together. All right, I think I have it all. Oh, these two are the same, but that's because I have 2 of these blocks. So that kind of works. So I have that there. This, though, well, if I do it there, I'm going to have that. So maybe I need a 4th block or a 3rd block. There we go. So see, that kind of steps in nice, and that works out well. And we don't have repeating side by side, but now this is alternating, and you're getting darks and lights. So here it goes from dark out to light. Here it goes from light out to dark. So when these blocks are set together, you can see you get this alternating pattern here and these common squares. And that makes for a really neat design. Now, let's take it even further. Let's see if we can mix 4 blocks together and without me getting too terribly confused. Number 4 actually had 2 variations, and that's a lot of fun. You have a couple options, and you can make both and alternate. There's so many ideas here that you can really go with and get some fun quilts made. But now there's one more, and you know, more is better. That's my theory when it comes to fabric. So you're going to have fun with this. This might be one I may even take up the challenge and make. Oh my goodness, I love this layout. So here's the second combination. Instead of just using 2 blocks, I have a total of 4 that I have cut down. So here's the center blocks like this, and then I have all these strips. So these will get put together here, and these have strips from all 4 blocks. So there's no repeating within these blocks. And that just creates such a great scrappy quilt. And you see here it goes from dark to light. Here it goes from light to dark. So you can put these blocks together, and you see that pattern just follows all the way around. So that as you put your blocks together, they're going to look great. You're going to get that consistency. But if you prefer, you can certainly do something like this. We'll switch those around. And let's see. All right, we're getting tricky here. We'll turn this around. There we are. So we don't have 2 of the same. But instead of going alternating light and dark, you can put 2 dark ones together. We can put 2 light ones together. There's any number of variations to this particular block, and it goes together very, very simply. It's fantastic as a scrappy quilt. And you can see how all these colors mix and match together. And because of the way they're placed, we have lights and darks. And again, we have a focal, an accent, a common color throughout all the blocks that just brings it all into one beautiful quilt. And I think these are some great options. And I was really excited to share this with you. So that's 5 different ways that you can use a 9-patch square to create all these different disappearing 9-patch blocks. You are going to have so much fun. You're not going to need a quilt pattern for months. Go through your scraps. Go buy the remnants. Go to your thrift shop. Find what you can get. There are 100% cotton sheets in the thrift shops at times. You can also buy pillowcases that are wonderful. Look and see where you can find all kinds of different fabrics, unless you already have a big stash at home and you're ready to cut into it. Either way, let's make some scrappy quilts. These are going to be great for spring. I love all the bright colors. They're going to be very welcoming to a change in seasons. I love this, and I hope you do too. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here and hanging with me through all this. That was a lot of information to look at, but it sure is some great eye candy. I have a number of ideas that I want to create for this kind of a quilt, and I even have one more block left that I didn't even cut into. So depending on which pattern I decide to go with, because I have enough here probably to make 2 quilts, one using this pattern and one using the other one where we cut it in the traditional 9-patch, but put those 4 blocks together in the middle. I like that the best. Okay, I said goodbye twice already. I mean it this time. I'll let you go. Have a wonderful rest of your day. As always, it's such a pleasure to share my quilts with you. Thank you so much.